Good Things I Wish You begins with a chapter that is actually nonfiction. My first date in 19 years was nearly an hour late. That chapter's straight out of life. I wrote that about 6 or 7 years after I first began what I thought was this historical novel. Understand what you're writing about. There are things between men and women that simply don't change, and of course they had a romantic relationship, and of course the relationship was consummated, and there's no mystery here. And here I was, with my idea of like Clara, writing about her beautiful friendship, and then here was this Brahmsian character going, no, they screwed each other. What's the point? I mean, what's the story? What's so interesting here? And Robert Schumann was institutionalized in 1854, and Brahms pretty much moved in. He was much younger than Clara. He was a beautiful young 19-year-old, and he took over the care of the children, the running of the household, while she returned to her concert career. But he would dash off and meet her places on the road. Within 2 weeks of Robert's funeral, 2 years later, they were on their way to Switzerland together. And whether or not passions arise and whether or not they are consummated, the fact that what this relationship offers the other person is so powerful and so important that it sustains those hurts and disappointments. It's really interesting to me. I think it's rare.
Absolutely. And mystifying.
And mystifying. And I think the one thing that's not mystifying about this is that both of them, it would make sense that they would connect, despite differences in age and differences in gender, which were much bigger issues then than they are now. Because who could she speak to? Who could Brahms speak to at that level about music? They were both geniuses. They had, of course, the Mendelssohns nearby. Clara didn't get along with Liszt. There was this little pool of and Wagner she just could not deal with and could not understand. He was never a friend. But just on a day-to-day basis, I think as writers sometimes we feel the same way. I mean, we're working in such isolation, and unless we're in an academic environment, we come out of the cave, and there's dinner to be cooked, and the kids' homework, and the spouse, and the car to the auto shop, and who do you talk to about this rich intellectual life that you have, this rich and imaginative creative life? When you find someone you can really connect with, that's very, very powerful. Why did they have this friendship that was so intense and yet always divided by distance and by almost deliberate circumstance? And I was curious about that, and I just couldn't answer the question accurately based on the historical detail that I could find. All correspondence between them for a year has been destroyed, and it's the year, of course, when he left her in Gerso, and about a year later there's one little scrap from Clara where she says, "I wish I could find longing as sweet as you do. It only gives me pain and fills my heart with unspeakable woe." And that's really the only little snippet we have. I think the big difference, even in letter writing between today and the 1850s and 60s, is, we always talk about the difference between writing an email and writing a letter, and the letter is this concrete thing, and we take our time and we sit and we pace ourselves, and there's a physical activity that goes with it. But even now, writing a letter, that letter will be received in a couple of days. It isn't that it takes 3 or 4 weeks. But they're wonderful to read, and of course we're talking about the Romantic era, and these were romantic people. And I love the way that they work their sentences to kind of milk out every rich nuance of devotion, or every petty grievance, which is also interesting. So I enjoyed that very much, reading those letters. And then I thought, well, why am I trying to do this with words? I have the picture, and the piece began to, it already started to collage itself, to kind of split apart into different sections, and then that really gave me permission to pursue that further. I often have to restrain myself forcibly from just quietly putting my arm around her, and even, I don't know, it seems to me so natural that she could not misunderstand. I think I can no longer love an unmarried girl. At least I've quite forgotten about them. They but promise heaven, while Clara shows it revealed to us. And on my desk was the plate that had the whatever I was munching at the time, which got in the corner. But this is actually a process journal I keep. I don't keep a diary or a journal per se, but I jot down notes. And I don't know, a friend had said, I was very recently divorced at that point, and a friend of mine had told me, you know, I think that until you grieve and heal, you'll keep attracting men who are not available to you. This has been my experience. And I wrote that into my process journal because, you know, there's Clara grieving so for Robert and becoming involved with this man who emotionally is not going to be able to return her affection the minute he feels her turning towards him. And I had written it out against his portrait just to kind of, I don't know, just because I like the words. This is, I guess, one of the translations I was using on the letters, and these are yeah, oh, I love this quote. This is also from Brahms. He's writing her a letter saying, I feel so happy, so peaceful and quiet. I feel as if you are with me. She's on the road traveling, and he's writing to her from home, from the kids, from where he is with the children. There's this wonderful safety of distance. There's this wonderful safety of the fact that she's still married. There's this wonderful safety of the fact that, you know, she's unreachable to him, and therefore he can pursue her safely. And but anyway, when I snapped the picture, I knew that that was kind of the mix that I would be thinking about as I moved into the next chapter, which is the Brahms and the Schumanns together right after their first meeting, when you know, he moved in with them as their guest for about 2 or 3 weeks, and during that time Robert's symptoms went away. Then Brahms left and returned to his mother, and shortly afterwards Robert jumped into the Rhine. And when I was actually in Gerso, I realized in this little tiny town in summer, with the humidity, with all the windows open, that if one person is playing the piano, the whole town hears it. Little details like that gave me a different sense of perspective and allowed me to enter the past in a way that I think is more realistic. Now, did I go to Gerso to understand how sound travels and how humidity impacts the way people, you know, move through their day? No, but those little details really came through in the fiction. They got the best from each other, since what initially attracted them to one another was their music. They both got to sustain that and the friendship that resulted from that music, which, despite the pain of the interpersonal relationship, was a worthwhile sacrifice, I think, for both of them. I think they both generated much out of longing, and though Brahms loved it in a way that Clara professed not to, they were both addicted to it. And in the same way, the contemporary characters of Hart and Jeanette are following that same pattern. At base, this is what I really wanted to get across in writing this book. This story is as living and as relevant now as it was 150 years ago. And by focusing on the contemporary relationship, I was able to really define for myself what I love about this story, what I first loved about this story, this historical story, what I've loved about it since I was, you know, an adolescent girl myself, reading about the lives of these wonderful composers and getting swept up in their romance and in their disappointment and in their pleasure in the musical world.